John Charles Fremont was an explorer, military officer, and political leader. In 1835, after leaving college, he joined the army. He explored and mapped much of the West, joined the Mexican-American War, and mapped a route to build a transcontinental railroad. He discovered gold, ran for president, and joined the American Civil War as well. He explored and mapped much of the West, encountered many disputes both politically and militarily, and exchanged his maps with others, which encouraged settling in the West. Fremont was born in Georgia on January 21, 1813. He grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and later moved to South Carolina. He went to Charleston College, though he didn't complete. Fremont then joined the Army in 1835 at age 22, and later, in 1838, he was promoted to second lieutenant in the Corps of Topographical Engineers and assisted Joseph Nicollet. In 1841, Fremont married Jessie Benton, Thomas Benton's daughter. Thomas was the senator of Missouri at the time. Thomas wanted and used Fremont to explore and map the West because Thomas believed that we as Americans should own the continent, as did many other politicians. As Fremont was preparing to leave on his first expedition, he ran into Kit Carson, a mountain man, on a Missouri River steamboat in 1842. Fremont was looking for a guide to take him to the South Pass in what is now Wyoming. Carson offered his services because he had spent much time in the area. Then, at age 29, Fremont went on his first expedition. The path Fremont took went through the Louisiana Purchase, through what is now Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. On November 29th, Fremont wrote, "We emerged from the basin by a narrow pass upon a considerable branch of Fall River, running to the eastward through the narrow valley. The trail descending this stream brought us to a locality of hot springs, which were on either bank. The journey took about 5 months. When Fremont wrote his report, the people saw that they could settle in the West, and many did so. The success of the journey led to a new expedition, which was planned for the next summer. Fremont's second expedition began in the summer of 1843. His goal was to map and describe the second half of the Oregon Trail, from the South Pass to the Oregon country. Due to Carson's proven skill as a guide, Fremont let him join on the expedition. They followed a route north of the Great Salt Lake, down the Snake River to the Columbia River, and into Oregon. Farther west, along the Columbia River, they came within sight of the Cascade Range peaks and Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood. Rather than continue west through Columbia River Gorge to Fort Vancouver, the party turned south and followed Fall Creek to its headwaters near the present-day northern border of California. Looping to the east to stay on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, he turned south again to what is now Minden, Nevada. Then, on the expedition, they turned west into the Sierra Nevada, and they were some of the first Americans to see Lake Tahoe. Carson led the party to a new pass through the Sierra, which Fremont named Carson Pass for Kit Carson. Once over the high pass, the party then descended from the American River Valley to Sutter's Fort, to what is now Sacramento, California. From there, Fremont went on Jedediah Smith's Trail, south along the eastern edge of the San Joaquin Valley, then turning back to the east through the Tehachapi Pass to what is now Las Vegas, before going back to Smith's Trail north through Utah, back through the South Pass. Fremont's path verified out all the land in the Great Basin, which is centered on Nevada between what is now Reno and Salt Lake City, had many lakes and rivers without any outlet rivers flowing towards the sea. The finding contributed greatly to a better understanding of North American geography. Congress published Fremont's report and map, and it guided thousands of overland immigrants to Oregon and California from 1845 to 1849. Fremont's report was a government publication that achieved the politician's goals for our nation, that we as Americans will expand westward because it provided information about the potential of the Trans-Mississippi West for pioneer settlement. For his achievement, Fremont received a promotion to captain in July 1844. In 1845, John Fremont and his group left St. Louis with Carson as guide on their third expedition. The goal was to locate the source of the Arkansas River on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. Upon reaching the Arkansas River, however, Fremont suddenly made a hasty trail straight to California without explanation. Arriving in the Sacramento Valley in 1846, he started to stir up patriotic feeling among the American settlers there. He promised that if a war with Mexico started, his military force will protect the settlers. Fremont nearly confronted Jose Castro, a Mexican general, near the summit of what is now named Fremont Peak because of it. Fremont fled from Jose because Jose could organize large amounts of troops easily, and Fremont's group would have been destroyed. Fremont fled Mexican-controlled California and went north to Oregon, making camp at Klamath Lake. Later, in the Mexican-American War, Fremont was appointed major in command of the California Battalion, also called U.S. Mountain Rifles, totaling of 428 men. Fremont then led the battalion to California and led a military expedition to Santa Barbara to capture it and surrounding cities. He went over the Santa Ynez Mountains at San Marcos Pass in the rain of December 24, 1846. He lost many horses, mules, and cannons due to the muddy slopes. He then took the town the next morning without death. The next day, he set out for Los Angeles, and once there, he agreed to the terms of Andres Pico, and Pico agreed to Fremont's terms, and they drew up the Treaty of Cahuanaga, signed in January 13, 1847, and thus ending the fighting in Upper California. Later, Fremont was assigned to become governor of California by Robert F. Stockton. Then, a higher-ranking officer named Stephen W. Kearny also was assigned the position and told Fremont to step down. When Fremont refused, he was court-martialed. He lost the trial, but James K. Polk, the president of the time, let Fremont stay in the army, but Fremont resigned. In 1848, Fremont went on another expedition to restore his honor and to map a route for a railroad that would connect St. Louis and San Francisco that was possible to cross during the winter along the 38th parallel, or 38 degrees north latitude. When his party reached Bent's Fort, he was strongly advised by most trappers against continuing the journey. A foot of snow was already on the ground at Bent's Fort, and the winter in the mountains promised to be very snowy. Part of Fremont's purpose was to show that the 38th parallel railroad would be possible year-round, and that includes harsh winters. On November 25th, on what is now Florence, Colorado, Fremont turned sharply south, but by the time his party crossed the Sangre de Cristo Range via Moscow Pass, they have already experienced days of bitter cold, blinding snow, and difficult travel. Some of the party, including their guide, had already turned back, saying that further travel would be impossible. Two people named Benjamin Kern and Old Bill Williams were killed while retracing the expedition trail to look for gears and survivors. In the harsh winter, Fremont finally got to Taos in New Mexico territory, but before they got there, 10 of their men have already died. Later, they found out that the path they took was too steep, but whenever they went on a new path, it ended up to be also too steep. After Fremont got resupplied, he left for California with only a few men, thus ending his expedition. In 1850, Fremont was given the Founder's Medal by the Royal Geographical Society for his many exploratory expeditions. Fremont later found gold on his land in California, but he lost it all later. In 1857, Fremont ran for president against James Buchanan, but lost. One reason was because people saw that he wanted to free the slaves, and believed that if he did win, there would be a civil war. It's ironic because the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, was the same, and it did result in a civil war, and they elected him. During the Civil War, Fremont was appointed as an Union general and posted in the West, but because he made a decision to free slaves in Missouri without the approval of Congress, he was demoted and put in the Mountain Department in Western Virginia. Carl Schurz, who was in the group, wrote, "At the beginning of the Civil War, I heard him spoken of in Washington as one of the coming heroes of the conflict in the most extravagant terms. I remember especially Mr. Montgomery Blair, the Postmaster General in Mr. Lincoln's administration, insisting that Mr. Fremont must at once be given large and important military command, and predicting that the genius and energy of this remarkable man would soon astonish the country." After many failed battles against Stonewall Jackson, Fremont was moved to New York City for the rest of the war. He resigned in 1862. Later, Fremont retired and died of peritonitis, which is an inflammation of the peritoneum, a silk-like membrane that lines your inner abdominal wall and covers your organs within your abdomen, usually due to bacteria or fungus. This is what happened to John Charles Fremont. He was indeed an explorer, a military leader, and a political leader all in one. Though he never held a high position for long, he made a large impact in America, because the West could still be controlled by Mexico, or we wouldn't have the courage to move westward due to the lack of information of the land.